Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Adi, and today we have another team report from the North American International Championships, and I am joined by another top player. I'm joined by Z. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me on the channel. I think I've got a pretty cool team, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, and you got ninth at the at North American International Championships. You just bubbled out, sadly. This is our second team report that we're going to be doing from a bubble because we also had Alex come on to talk about his team. So, but just barely missed out on top cut with one of the more interesting teams with Maridon. But I guess first we should let you tell yourself. But I guess first we should let you tell a little. Fuck, dude, I cannot talk today. Oh my god. But first, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Z. I've been playing for 10 seasons now, which is quite a lot. I started out in the seniors division way back in 2015. Uh, I've been in the masters division since 2017, so quite a while now. Uh, this will be my third World Championships qualification that I played in August in 2024, and this is my first time making day two of NAIC. I made day two of EUIC last year, but my previous two NAICs were flops, so I'm very content to make it through this year.
Yeah, and not only did you make it through, you had a cutting record, and again, just barely bubbled out at ninth, the first player to miss. But you had a really cool take on Miridon. So yeah, and I think a lot of people, when I was watching recaps of this tournament, everyone was really hyped to see Talonflame do well again. Not a Pokemon that's seen a lot of play. So talk me through how you built this team and how you got to, and why you decided to use Miridon in the first place.
Yeah, so in the lead up to the tournament, I was coming off of a top 32 performance in Indianapolis, running the Colorix Ice team that was built by myself, Justin Burns, and Zalmog Ryan Haig. Justin Burns and Zalmog were able to get top cut finishes with it, top four and a second place respectfully. But I choked a 10-1 to 10-4 to miss cutting Indianapolis. And I kind of felt like maybe Colorix Ice was a little bit more suited to them than it was to me. So going into NASC, I was trying to mess around with different restricteds and see if there was something that I was missing, something that maybe fit me a little bit better. And I kind of talked to my friend groups, and I was listing out the Pokemon in like a tier list of things I would be interested in messing around with. And one night, I'm in a call with some of my friends from like a spot show group, and I was just lamenting about how Miraidon sort of interests me because it hits like an unreal power level. It reminds me of Reggie Drago, which was something I was able to top cut a regional with earlier in the season. But I felt like some of the gameplay didn't quite work out, and I expressed that the Pokemon wasn't for me. And Amelia Forbes is actually the one in call to be like, I don't quite disagree with the reasons you're calling it bad. And one of the things I said was that it's like a 50-50 Pokemon, which I was probably just from like a couple of salty games that I played on the ladder with Rajan's winning variant, and I lost because I didn't understand the team. So, like, I kind of thought about it after that call ended, and I'm like, is Miraidon really as bad as I think it is? Surely it isn't. And so I got to work building on some Miraidon teams, and yeah, you can tab into the old one right there. That is pretty much where I started. Because I wanted to try Life Orb because it was the set that Emilio suggested to me that a lot of people weren't thinking about since Choice Specs was the one to win the regional. And so I put this team together, and I thought I had a lot of cool stuff going for it. One thing that was interesting to me was that with the combination of the Miraidon and the Choice Scarf, Ground, Parablast GU, and the Iron Bundle, I was winning like every Miraidon mirror, which was nice. And I was also beating a lot of other like hyper offense matchups just because that is a lot of speed and damage that you have to be able to respond to. But the team kind of had a lack of stability. There's GU Bundle. That's a lot of moves to miss between the two of those guys. Um, Iron Hands is pretty much like the only point of bulk on the team, and I felt like a lot of the leads had to revolve around Miraidon. So overall, it was nice, but there were just some things that I wasn't quite a fan of, and it was cool to see some of these ideas eventually like make it into the Italian team that did well in Bologna and did well at NAIC, the one that used the Choice Scarf Chiyu and I believe Dark Urshifu and stuff like that. But I I felt like the build just didn't quite click with me. So I tried to drop it for a while, and I sort of returned looking at Calrex Ice builds with a couple of other tub players. But the tournament was fast approaching, and the Calrex Ice discussions hadn't really gotten anywhere that particularly moved me. And I remember Monday, I'm checking through my chats just to kind of check up on what happened overnight. And I saw Rajan post these 6 Pokemon. Um, and I believe it was like a rough OTS. Like some had sets, maybe they weren't entirely filled out, and it just like a light bulb went off in my head. I'm like, wow, a lot of the issues I had with Miraidon seem to be fixed by this build. And like immediately I saw it, and the gears in my head just started turning. I'm like, I really like what POW Hands can do as a lead. Justin Burns is someone that has previously talked about the strength of POW Hands in older formats, but I really like that it's a lead that gives you both the bulk of Iron Hands and the offensive and fast pressure of Chimpao. Really puts a lot of leads in a bind, especially in offensive teams, which are a lot more prevalent in this format. So I like that from the get go, I had lead options that weren't entirely centered around the Miraidon, because that was one thing that I felt like was just that Miraidon had to be led, it had to be putting on the pressure. And that kind of scared me, because I felt like if I whiffed one play with Miraidon from the lead, I'd probably be in a disadvantage. So that was interesting. The other thing, the standout Pokemon probably to most people here, is the Talonflame. And I was really interested in Talonflame because it combined having the Tailwind, which I think is an absolute necessity for Miraidon teams. There are some that I saw that didn't use Tailwind, like the ninth place team at LA from Hoopu Metapod. But for the most part, most successful Miraidon teams were running Tailwind, and I didn't feel like I wanted to opt out of that. So I like that Talonflame still kept the priority Tailwind option, but it had offense. A lot of people don't know, but the Life Orb Adamant Brave Bird will OHKO 4 HP Chiyu 15 out of 16 times, and I was able to get that KO once during the tournament, and then one time I Brave Birded Chiyu and it survived. But it was still nice to have that option as like my Tailwind setter covering the Scarf Terra Ground Blast Chiyu for my Miraidon. Brave Bird punishes Terra Grasses. It hits Rillaboom, which is really nice because the more things to pressure Rillaboom, the better. Will-Wisp was pretty useful. Burning Iron Hands in Miraidon mirrors was extremely useful because I was able to burn the Iron Hands and then get up Trick Room, and they didn't really have anything to threaten my Trick Room core. Um, it also helps against Zamazenta, funnily enough, because Zamazenta can be a decently hard matchup for Miraidon. It depends. A lot of them have Jolly, Ice Spin, or Chimpao, so you kind of have to outmaneuver them, but being able to Will-Wisp either the Chimpao or the Zamazenta is quite helpful. So all in all, I saw the build and I just thought that it fixed a lot of the problems that I had with Miraidon from my experience. And so I messaged Raja and I'm like, hey, I want to get in on this. Are you cool with it? And he said, yeah, hop on. And so while Rajan later on, like later in the day, kind of went to looking at other options to sort of fill out the team, I was pretty much stuck on this one. I the entire time I looked at it, I was just like, this is the play. This is the play.
Yeah, I think Rajan built a slightly different version, a couple different Pokemon that I'm also working to pull up. I did not think about that ahead of time, but yeah, I saw y'all were building and labbing out. Well, Rajan was building out until the last minute. Again, had a slightly different take on it. Yeah, I guess from there you have a different take on Miraidon than what Rajan had originally in Indie. That was such a formative sort of the formative the formative team for Miraidon, I guess. Where if you listen to his team report, even though some of these Pokemon are the same, the sets are very, very different. And so tell me about why you chose these movesets and these EV spreads, because I know Rajan would have never stood for Tim and Miraidon a month ago.
Yeah, so let's just start top to bottom. And I do think it is important to point out that Rajan, in the end, I'm pretty sure did go modest Miraidon. I'm pretty sure that was one of his principles that he wasn't willing to yield to. But I was very adamant that timid was the play, uh, because I just felt like having the speed advantage in the mirror and the speed advantage on like things like Koraidon, and I felt like even if some people were going to go plus speed nature, a lot of them would probably stop at like 124 or 132 EVs, which is why I went all the way up to 148. It also allowed me to have a little bit of bulk, which was quite nice. It ended up mattering a lot throughout the tournament. One thing that uh, Ryan was giving me a lot of trouble for was that I said I counter teamed him because I EV'd my Miraidon to have, I believe, like a 1 in 8 chance, sorry, a 7 out of 8 chance to live Helping Hand Close Combat from like his Urshifu Pelipper lead, whereas 4 HP Miraidon has a 3 out of 4 chance to go down to that. And there were a lot of other things that the bulk was useful for. It overall just made me a lot more comfortable using the Pokemon because, like, a lot of people don't think about it because it's obviously like no Color X Ice Rider or anything like that. But 100, 100, 115 bulk is quite respectable. As for the moves in the Terra type, I didn't really feel like there was anything to change up there. Electric just for maximizing the damage output and helping defensively, removing a lot of removing those dragon weaknesses. Interestingly enough, I did play one Covert Cloak Miraidon during the day, and obviously because they don't have the choice specs boost, they aren't able to take out Miraidon when it's Terra Electric with Draco Meteor, which choice specs will do. It's also quite useful for playing like Dittos, where Ditto similarly doesn't have a boosting item, so if you Terra Electric, it won't be able to take you out with Draco Meteor, which was very useful when I played Justin Burns in day two. Um, that's it for Miraidon. Chip-Pow, Rajan and I kind of talked about potentially not running Sacred Sword and doing something like Crunch or Third Chop instead. But in the end, I decided to do Sacred Sword just because I wanted something to help out in the Zamazenta matchup. And I felt like not being able to hit mirror Chimpows in particular was probably disadvantageous, as well as Chiyus and Incineroars. So overall, just having the fighting coverage there really helped out in my opinion. Um, Chimpow was actually the one Pokemon that I never ended up terastallizing during the tournament. I don't think that Stellar Terrastalize would have or Stellar Terra type would have been better. Having the pressure of Ghost on the team sheet, I think, forced my opponents into some ways where they never really wanted to fake out the Chimpow if my Terra hadn't been used yet. So I don't think I would change that. Spread really standard, obviously, just the four defense to make sure you're always taking like Scarf or non-boosting item Urshifu Surging Strikes. Um, and then we get to the really interesting Iron Hands set. Um, I don't remember if I had this Iron Hands set on the pace that I sent you earlier as like the prototype pace, but I do know that at some point I was testing double fighting Iron Hands because I was like, I really like close combat to have the burst damage. And I really like Drain Punch because sometimes reducing your longevity isn't always good, and in fact, the opposite of that, healing up, is quite good. So Roger mentioned it too, and I knew when we both were like thinking about that, like it's probably a good idea that two of us arrived at that conclusion independently. And so I knew that that was the idea that I wanted to pursue. However, Roger and I both agreed that Wild Charge wasn't actually like that important of a move, and so we ended up going with Heavy Slam, which I really liked. I liked being able to Oko Whimsicott. I liked being able to hit Landorus Eye. I liked yeah, those are the two main things. Terra Fairy Calyrex was another one. In Trick Room, you can sort of pin Shadow Rider with Foul Play and Heavy Slam, which is really, really nice. The EV spread is a little interesting. I believe first of all, I wanted to maximize the special defense investment. So I'm pretty high on that just to make sure that I'm always taking choice specs right on Draco Meteors with a little bit left over and being able to Drain Punch off those. And then I went for a lot of attack investment to compound with Quark Drive, with Sword of Ruin, and just to make sure that those close combats are doing a lot of damage. I believe the benchmark I stopped at was to always Oko or always 2-hit KO Impish Zamazenta with a Quark Drive Drain Punch. Maybe in Sword of Ruin, I actually forget. And then after that, I went with 44 speed EVs, which creeps 36 speed EVs Iron Hands, which is 75 speed stat, which is for Adamant, Urshifu, and Tailwind. Just doing that to have 1 point faster made me feel pretty good in situations where I wouldn't be able to, or I wouldn't want to set Trick Room. And I did have that come up a time or two where I was the faster Iron Hands, and it was very important that I was the faster Iron Hands. And then I had a couple EVs left over, so I decided to invest those in defense instead of HP, so that I both took mirror Drain Punches a little bit better and had less HP for my opponents to recover from Drain Punch. The Terra type kind of went back and forth. I was originally Grass, and then I sent Grass to Raj, and he was like, I don't know if I like Grass so much. At one point, we were a Ghost to take on the Zamazenta matchup a little bit better and be immune to body press and be immune to non-Terra Starstorm from Terrapagos, forcing them to Terra, dropping the Terra Shell, and making close combat do a lot of damage to them. And then, like in the day, maybe like 36 hours leading up to the tournament, we were Terra Flyer to help like you Fluttermane better and be immune to Will-Wisp. But like right before the tournament, Rajan's like, I think I want to be grass. And I forget his exact reasoning, but my reasoning for grass was that I feel like you want something to help out if you're in a situation where you're fighting in Mungus and they have the ability to cancel out grassy or electric terrain. This can be something as simple as playing like a team that has both Relevum and a Mungus. It could be a Terapagos plus a Mungus board where they can terastalize and clear out your electric terrain, or just for the ability to hit around a Mungus in the board where you don't have like discharge available or something like that. Overall, grass proved to be very useful. I used it a lot during the tournament, especially in my stream game versus Henry Rich, where I was able to tear grass and take a combination of a water spout, a Sandseer Storm at -1 special defense, and an Ice Beam at -1 special defense, which was very important for me winning the game that I terastalized it in. The Talonflame, pretty simple, max attack. You really need it for the Brave Bird rolls on Chiyu. And there was a game I played against Tiki Chase where I won game one with a like 10% Talonflame that eventually died to its own recoil by being able to Brave Bird his like 65% Tear Grass Zamazenta. And I really wasn't sure if it was going to get there or not because it still had the +1 defense boost. But fortunately, it was able to take the knockout, and I attribute that totally to maximizing the attack and then going for maximum speed, which I think was the correct choice. There's nothing really to be gained by just upping the HP by a few points, and doing anything super slow with the speed just didn't seem acceptable. Going on to the Ursaluna, which is another really interesting set. It's double normal with Calm Mind. And the reason for this, and it was again another thing that Rajan and I sort of mentioned independently of each other, which was one of those things where it turned off a light bulb in my head once again. If two people are coming up with the same idea independently, it's probably quite interesting. And that was Calm Mind being useful for punishing double protect when playing something like Calyrex Clefairy and they need to stall your Trick Room. So that was cool. I got to use it a little bit in my sets versus Eric Rios and Juan Manuel Odriozola, and it was quite helpful there. And also, I felt like it was acceptable to drop Earth Power because if I was playing something that I wanted to hit with Earth Power, I was probably just going to hit them with a Terra Electric move or Terra Normal Blood Moon, and those things would pick up the kill anyways. So I felt pretty okay dropping Earth Power. There was never really a set where I missed it. And
Mhm.
then lastly, the Frigoraph. Probably the one thing that I feel like I should touch on the EVs first, Luna, just a second. Um, I thought about investing in special defense for a bit, just because having the low special defense makes it so that if you invest more in it, obviously you're going to get bigger returns off of the +1 special defense from Calm Mind. But the HP investment was pretty crucial to letting straight physical hits. Interestingly, I never died to a close combat from Urshifu over the entire course of the tournament, and I took quite a few. And I would not have been able to do that if I focused more on, say, just doing like 4 HP, 4 defense, 252 special attack, and 196 special defense, or something like that. So I feel like the EV spread there worked out perfectly.
Did you feel like the lack of special bulk was concerning? I know I actually tested a combine set with some different choices, but I felt like I wasn't doing enough into Maridon because they could just Draco me and do too much even at +1 Spadef. So did you feel like that was okay?
Yeah, I never brought Ursaluna to the Maridon mirrors, and we can talk about this more when we get into the match analysis. But I played 6 Maridon mirrors over the course of the tournament, so by the end, I was quite knowledgeable about what to do in the Maridon mirror. But all 5 of the other Pokemon are just more bringable. So I was mostly looking at Ursaluna for stuff like the Calyrex Shadow matchup because I did test like you saw earlier. I tested variants of Maridon without Ursaluna, and I felt like the Shadow Rider matchup was just so hard. Um, Other than that, it was mostly useful for teams that didn't have super strong Trick Room matchups, which tends to be stuff like Koraidon. I was able to use it in my round 15 against a Koraidon team. And I also brought it into Palachua's Ice Rider variant, which was nice because there was not a lot to stop the discharge plus the Ursaluna Hyper Voice pin from the start. And overall, like it's pretty good the matchups that it comes to, but it was definitely my least used Pokemon. But I think if I had gotten a different matchup spread, it would have been able to come and shine a lot more. So I don't regret using the Ursaluna or the specific set at all.
Yeah, it's definitely a very different take on Ursaluna. I don't think anyone's run something like this yet to any sort of success, so it's super cool to see.
Yeah, and to round things off, for Graph, it's nothing super revolutionary. It is the Terra Ground Electric Seed set. I never did get to pull off the like Terra Ground Helping Hand Discharge in the tournament, but having that option available again, it's kind of like the Ghost Chimpow. Just things that you can have available as options on your team sheet are going to force your opponent to play a specific way, even if you never get to actually click the buttons in tournament. So I felt pretty good about all those. The one thing that I regret is Twin Beam, and I mentioned this a couple times online already. But I really wish I had Psychic Noise, and I feel like it was kind of an oversight that I would have been able to pick up upon had I played a little bit more leading up into the tournament. Because this whole thing started on the Monday before the tournament, and I was not going to play any on Thursday. So I effectively had 72 hours once I was sort of honing in on this idea to get it ready to play in the tournament. And so Twin Beam was because when I was sort of panicking over how to flesh the team out, I was looking at the results from Bologna and seeing that there was a lot of that Mian Chao Calyrex team that did very well. And I wanted Twin Beam to be able to Oko Mian Chao so that I could not have to worry about it, say, wide guarding on my Ursaluna or just surviving with Focus Sash and then being able to fire off close combat onto Ursaluna. So that was very important. But I never actually played a Mienshao or a Sash or Shifu Water, which is what the EV spread is designed to KO. The special attack investment lets you exactly KO for special defense Sash or Shifu Water. So I would have been able to run Psychic Noise and I think just have a bit more bulk, which would have come up, say, in like the Calyrex Ice matchups, just being able to take like another Glacial Lance or just being able to take the Glacial Lance is a little bit better. Would probably be useful. So that would be my one point of advice to anybody that's looking to pick up this team going forward would be to change the Twin Beam to Psychic Noise and add a little bit more defensive investment to the Frigoraph.
We ran Psychic Noise in our Farograph on our Dirkram team, and oh my god, especially into opposing Iron Hands, which I'm sure is a problem for right on. It
Yes.
was so good just to turn off Drain Punch. Oh my god, that move really was. I mean, that salvaged my right on matchup personally. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's something to that was some technology that was maybe discovered at Bologna actually on the second place team, and was really strong. But yeah, I guess you mentioned that you never Terra grounded the Farigraph and did the discharge play. I have always been very curious whether or not that actually happens because it seems like a cool line, but also like very committal. Did you ever Terra ground the Talonflame and do the discharge play?
Interestingly enough, I did, and it was in the game where my Brave Bird failed to KO my opponent's Chiyu because I was staring down like a 10% Chiyu and an Iron Hands, and I had to get Tailwind up. And I'm like, well, they're not going to Terra Ground Blast into my Talonflame that is still currently a flying type. They're probably going to Wild Charge it because it's the only thing that can hit it for any significant damage. And so I went for the Terra Ground. I sacked whatever Pokemon was next to my Talonflame. I think it was Friggorath that had already taken a Terra Blast. So I sacked that, and then I was able to Brave Bird. Well, I didn't set up the discharge play, but Terra Ground helped a lot, and I was able to Brave Bird the Chiyu and take that out. And then I like Draco Meteor the Iron Hands, and without Terra Ground, like I would have not been able to get Tailwind up. So that was very important. But yeah, once again, you're right. I never actually set up the Terra Ground discharge plays, but I just think having the sheet pressure is so important that I would not have changed it.
Hmm. Yeah, and absolutely on Talonflame especially, I think it just is a good defensive Terra, anyways, like you said. Um, but yeah, so that's a great overview of the team. I think that people look at these six and it looks pretty standard. It's I think only one mod off of Rajan's original team, but obviously these sets are so different, and I think you really did a good job of reevaluating the roles of all these Pokemon and optimizing them for their jobs, and really created I think one of the strongest Miraidon teams out there. And so I guess with that, do you want to tell us about how to play the team? How did you approach some of the common matchups, or were there any common game plans that you defaulted to?
Yeah, so in terms of formulating game plans, like I said, I really only had 72 hours to prepare for the tournament. However, I spent a lot of that time actually playing games against myself in like an incognito tab. And I felt like that was just the quickest way possible for me to put a paste in the incognito tab, come up with like a game plan in my head, and then kind of run the game plan in the other tab and make sure that what I was doing in my head, like my work checked out, I guess, so to speak. And so a couple things I came up with. were doing Chimpal plus Iron Hands for the Miraidon Mirror, and it worked for a variety of different Miraidon Mirror teams. So that was one thing that I did for a lot of them was do Chimpal plus Iron Hands with Talonflame and Miraidon in the back. And then as the adjustment, what I did for a lot of games was do Talonflame Miraidon lead with Friggraph and Iron Hands in the back, where I hoped to, because I was timid Miraidon, I outsped every single Miraidon I played in the mirror, which forced a lot of my opponents to like double back into their Iron Hands. And so that was the type of play where I could set up like Draco Meteor plus Will-O-Wisp or just Draco Meteor Tailwind into a follow-up Draco Meteor onto their Iron Hands turn movement to open up the Trick Room mode. And a lot of people would see Talonflame and they're like, oh, Talonflame has to set up Tailwind this turn to Talonflame has to set up Tailwind this turn to get the priority, because if I hit it, then it's not going to be able to hit for priority next turn. So I'll stagger my Tailwind. But then what they didn't realize when they were staggering their Tailwind is that I had the Trick Room mode in the back, and I was ultimately able to sweep them that way. And so that was what I would do for the mirror. For Ice Rider, what I typically did was Miraidon, Friggraph, Iron Hands, and then a filler. And actually, interestingly enough, I ended up bringing all of Talonflame, Chimpao, and Ursaluna into various Ice Rider matchups throughout the tournament. Um, Talonflame was because I was playing against the Rain variant with Scarf or Shifu, and I needed to have the Tailwind pressure in order to outspeed the Urshifu for a line that I had come up with. Chimpao was because hard committed to terrestrializing my Miraidon, because this was against Justin Burns, and I needed to terrestrialize my Miraidon to survive the Ditto's Draco Meteor if he ever got to that point. And I felt like having Chimpao to Sucker Punch, like the Chip Ditto, and to force the Calyrex to Terra were all pretty nice. And that did end up working out. I did take one game off the set with that plan of 4, and Ursaluna just to set up the like self-discharge hyper voice play. All of those are pretty nice. So I would say that as long as you're doing Miraidon, Friggraph, Iron Hands, you can bring anything into the Ice Rider matchup as long as it sort of fits the specific game plan you want to come up with. Shadow Rider, I mostly did Miraidon, Friggraph, Iron Hands, and Ursaluna Blood Moon. Um, this worked out really well in testing. It worked out less in practice against Eric Rios, who was the only Shadow Rider I played, and I played him twice. I played him both on day 1 and day 2, and he made up 2 of my 3 losses. However, I feel like, again, Psychic Noise would have been able to address that because he had an Iron Hands that kind of just kept Dream Punching all my guys. So, more reasons to change to that. But it was very successful in testing, especially against like the Clefairy variants, which I was more expecting to play. Into Terapagos, the main thing that I feel like you want to be doing is trying to get them to activate their Terraform Zero as early as possible in order to get them to become vulnerable to fighting, so that Iron Hands can take those spread Terra Starstorms, which become weaker, and then do a lot of damage with close combat. Terrain management is very important, and Terra Grass to make sure that you're not eating those spores is also very important. Let's see, Kyogre. I played a couple Kyogres throughout the day. Obviously, I don't think many people will need to worry about their Overclow matchups going forward. But it is mostly a matter of making sure that you have the speed advantage, because especially with this team's ability to pin Terra types that resist electric, ground and grass, having the speed advantage, having the Miraidon go first, and then having the Talonflame or the Chinpow next to it to punish those grass Terras and the Kyogre or whatever else might be terrain was very, very important. Am I missing anything?
Well, if there's anything that you missed that you want to talk about, we can pull up your schedule and we can talk about your tournament
Right.
experience, because, practice is great, but I feel like this tournament was maybe not the metagame that we expected. A lot of these teams were similar, but not quite the same as the teams that were doing well in the past, just like yours. And so it was, there's only so much you can test, and then you kind of just get thrown into the fire and figure out how it goes. And oh my God, you really did face a lot of Miraidon.
I sure did. Six.
All right.
Six of my 12 wins were Miraidon mirrors.
So tell me about your tournament run and some highlight games that you played.
Yeah, I won't dive into this game, but I just do want to mention that nothing scared me more than sitting down for round 1 and being handed the team sheet of Ting Lu, Zamazenta, AV, Raging Bolt. That was quite a way to start my day. But Iron Hands was able to deal with that one pretty well. The first matchup that I guess I really want to talk about is Alex Rand, round 4, because he was the first recognizable opponent I played, and it was in the mirror, which was quite scary. But I stuck to my game plans that I came up with in practice. I did Miraidon and Pow I did Chip Pow and Iron Hands in game 1, and was able to take that. And then I expected Alex to adjust with a lead that was more vulnerable to Miraidon leads, to a lead Miraidon's pressure. And so I, once again, because I was up a game, I decided that I was more willing to bank on calling out a lead. And so I went for the Miraidon lead, and I actually ended up getting that turn 1 wrong, if I remember correctly. But I was able to position Iron Hands and Frigoraph at the end game, where Iron Hands was just staring down the left slot, could not protect. I took 1 KO, and then Alex's Iron Hands is on one side of the field, and it's like a Scarf Tube on the other side, and I just go for Helping Hand Dream Punch. That gets knocked out, and then Miraidon hits the field. Trickroom is still up. Helping Hand close combat with the Quark Drive boost takes out the Miraidon, and so Alex's team was able to kind of fall apart that way. So that was a win that I felt pretty good about. Afterwards, I played Yotam in a similar Miraidon mirror that I was able to take 2-0. Using a lot of the same plans that I came up with against Alex. Round 6 was scary, playing against Tiki Chase's Zamazenta team. So Rajan and I had one Pokemon that we were talking about as being potentially scary in the lead up to the tournament, and that was Golden Go. And I was like, I don't think I'm really going to play a Golden Go. But if you recall, our Iron Hands does not have Wild Charge, and our Ursaluna does not have Earth Power. So we were just kind of banking on dodging Golden Go. And I already knew that Chase had Golden Go because he tweeted about it earlier that morning. And interestingly enough, this was also a Rocky Helmet Golden Go. Yeah, so Rocky Helmet Golden Go was pretty hard to deal with because it would break Chimpow's Focus Sash if I Sucker Punched into it, and Sucker Punch doesn't KO outright. So really, the only thing that I had to take out the Golden Go was Miraidon, which meant that my preservation of it was really important. So game 1, he leads Ogerpon and Raging Bolt, and I go for Fake Out Icicle Crash into the Raging Bolt, and I miss Icicle Crash. So that was a pretty sour way to start off the game. But I made a lot of aggressive plays and was able to get myself into an end game where I got a Will-O-Wisp off onto Chimpow to break its Focus Sash. And then I was able to, with my full HP Miraidon, survive the combination of Ice Spinner and full power Body Press. And Miraidon put on enough pressure that Chase had to target into that. And he also ended up Terragrassing his Zamazenta earlier this set because of Miraidon's pressure. And so it was weak to Talonflame's Bravebird, and even at 75, 60%, whatever it was at, Bravebird was able to finish it off, and I won game 1 0-0. So that was nice. Game 2, Chase makes the Golden Go adjustment, which I was really scared of, and I tried pretty hard to correct it with Miraidon. I had there was a turn where I called that he was going to switch out the +2 special attack Golden Go. But what I did not expect was Chase adapting with his own Whimsicott in a game where I benched Talonflame. And so eventually he sets up his Golden Go to take out my Miraidon, even though it's chipped. And because my Miraidon falls, I have nothing else to break the Golden Go, and I end up forfeiting that game. So game 3 was probably the wildest play I have ever made in my competitive Pokemon career to start. I met with Ogerpon and Golden Go in the lead, and I led Miraidon and Iron Hands. Both these Pokemon can double protect. Chase can very easily scout what my choice lock is going to be. And if he sees that I lock into Discharge, he can very easily just switch the Golden Go out for Raging Bolt. If he sees that I click Volt Switch, well, then he can stay in with the Golden Go, set of Nasty Plots, and also hit my switch in if he wants to. So I'm I just can't let Chase figure out my lock. But how do I not lock into a move this turn? I fake out myself. I do maybe 20% to myself with Fake Out because it's an Iron Hands and Quark Drive. But this sets me up to where Chase doesn't know my lock for turn 2. And I discharge. I Terra Electric Discharge. and Iron Hands takes a good chunk from Terra Electric Discharge. It's not like half, but it is significant damage. It does about 75 to his Ogre Pawn, and then the Golden Go ends up switching out for Raging Bolt. But I also close combated the Golden Go slot, so the Raging Bolt takes the discharge in the close combat. It lives at like 10%. And from that point, everything is in discharge range. And so I'm able to just discharge. And this time I was prepared for the back Whimsicott. But if you recall, I already mentioned the Ogre Pawn, the Golden Go, and the Raging Bolt. Chase did have the back Whimsicott, which meant that he benched his Zamazenta, which meant that there was no wide guard option to stop my discharge spam. So once I got that board position right, I sort of was able to run away with the game and take the set. But that was by far the most nervous I was locking into play on turn 1 of game 3.
That's crazy. And to match that, he didn't bring the Zamazenta too, which is just also a kind of crazy line to take. Yeah.
So yeah, then for the 6-0 game, I played another Maridon Mirror. Again, I was able to use kind of the same plans. Round 8, I played Eric Rios, and they had us on the side TV. I don't know if this game got recorded or if the side TV games have been uploaded yet, but I was able to take game 1 as Eric leads Iron Hands Calyrex, and I led for Graph Maridon, and I just go for Helping Hand Draco Meteor into the Iron Hands as the Calyrex protects, and the Iron Hands dies, and then Eric's Incineroar, Amoonguss, and Calyrex just don't have enough resources to take out Friggraff, Maridon, Iron Hands, and Ursaluna. But after that, Eric adjusted pretty well, and he decided, oh yeah, I probably should not give my opponent my Iron Hands on turn 1. So he started leading Urshifu Calyrex into my Maridon Friggraff. I switch out Maridon for Iron Hands to take the close combat plus Astral Barrage. But it was at that point, the matchup basically became navigating the 4 turns of Trick Room better than Eric did. And he got me pretty well in both games. He would protect with Calyrex when I would hit into Calyrex. He would Calm Mind with Calyrex when I wanted to ignore it and try to hit the other slot. And in game 3, I found out that his Iron Hands was slower than both my Friggraff and my Iron Hands. And that was frustrating because he was able to Drain Punch me well before I could attack and get enough health back to take a game 3 that I thought I had enough momentum in. So I ended up dropping to Eric. And in day 2, just to go ahead and get it out of the way, it kind of played out the same way, where we played a game where I just could not navigate the Trick Room turns well enough. I got really close, but ultimately, close isn't good enough. And then in game 2 of the day 2 set, I was like, okay, I'm going to lead Talonflame, and I'm just going to go with a Tailwind mode, play it really aggressive, and see if he's overcompensating for me going slow. So I lead Talonflame Maridon, and he leads Urshifu Calyrex, and I just got owned by Aqua Jet plus Astral Barrage. So that was not the line. So yeah, Eric had my number in this tournament for sure. But round 9, I played Paul Chua, and I was terrified to see Paul Chua on my opponent's list because I was like, oh man, I'm really going to choke this 7-0 to 7-2. And, the difference between being 7-0, 7-2 and 8-1 and day 2 of NAIC to start is huge. So I really wanted to do as best as I can in this matchup. And when I saw the team list, I'm like, well, this is one of the matchups I sort of prepared for. And I knew it was Zom's variant, and Zom was already joking about me counter teaming him. So I'm like, okay, let's see if I can put Zom's theory to the test. And I remember game 1, I actually thought I was going to lose for a while, but there was a turn where I was crucially able to pick up a KO on the non-Calyrex slot as Calyrex protected, which gave me a lot of momentum, and I set myself up perfectly to reinstate the Electric Terrain after it first faded and line up an Electric Drift onto Calyrex before it could Trick Room to close the game out. Game 2, I open with the Maridon and Ursaluna Blood Moon lead because Paul started game 1 with Amoonguss and Calyrex Ice. And so I was like, okay, I'll punish that with the double spread moves because I feel like Paul probably feels like he only lost because he got some reads wrong. And this is where Rajan does get some points for yelling at me to be modest because the Terra Electric Discharge plus Hyper Voice left his Calyrex with probably about all of 5 HP. and then the Amoonguss was able to paw and puff it up as my Blood Moon Ursulina died to a Glacial Lance. So that was rough, and I kind of fell apart in that game. Game 3 was the game where I ended up making the Talonflame adjustment to call out the double water lead, and I was just able to have Miraidon on the field at the right turns. I got Frigoraph in to get the defense boost and reverse Trick Room towards the end. And overall, I just had too much offense to kind of overwhelm all the teams. So I was able to finish day one 8-1, which I was elated about. And then going into day 2, I had the game against Henry Rich on stream, which I won't talk about too much since people can find that, but you can go ahead and pull it up. Overcoat was definitely not something that I was expecting. I don't think anybody was expecting.
I lost to it too.
But
yep.
yeah, I was freaking out. Mostly not because of the overclow though, because of the Scarf Landorus Eye, which meant that I could not just set up Tailwind and Volt Switch the not Landorus slot because the Landorus would kill me before I could Volt Switch. So I had to lead Talonflame Chinpow, which was a lead that I had never come up with in testing, never come up with in any theory, and never did ever again in the tournament. But just this was the matchup where I had to do it. And it also worked out well for pressuring other things since Henry had no Intimidate and no priority block. So the Brave Bird plus Sucker Punch pressure was really nice. I had the Tailwind plus the Kill the Landorus pressure. And I was able to just sort of play that game to where I removed the Landorus and then opened up my Miraidon. Game 2, the Bolt Beam pin came in really handily because I kept just clicking Icicle Crash and Volt Switch in the slots and picking up KOs. So that was nice. The next set that I think is important to talk about is probably my loss to Justin Burns in round 13. I saw Justin's Swiss set where he led Ditto into the Geo, and I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to let Justin just copy my Miraidon from the lead, so I'm going to lead Miraidon in slot 2. Justin knew that I knew that he knew that So he leads Ditto in slot 2 and gets my Miraidon. I'm like, dang it. So I was forced to tear Electric off Rip, but I did have the Helping Hand Draco Meteor lined up into the Iron Hands, which once again kind of left Justin with just Ditto, Amoonguss, and Calyrex. However, we get to the end game, and I had a play where it was like Frigoraph and Iron Hands with my Chimpo in the back against Justin's Calyrex at full HP and nothing else. Glacial Lance takes out my Frigoraph, and I Drain Punch the Calyrex instead of close combating it. And as soon as I clicked the button, I was like, I messed up. Close combat would have put the Calyrex in range of 2 Sucker Punches, but instead, because I Drain Punched, I had to protect Sucker Punch, or something. Yeah, I had to Sucker Punch, protect to stall a Trick Room. That's what it was. And in the last turn of Trick Room, Trick Room expires. I have to go for the Icicle Crash Flinch to take out this, 25% HP Calyrex. Hope I get the flinch, and I don't. So we go into game 2, and I was able to basically just operate my game 1 game plan a little bit better. So I found an early hit onto the Calyrex for about 35% or so, which gave me enough damage to close out the end game where I lined up a Draco Meteor onto his Calyrex. So that was nice. Going into game 3, Justin leads Iron Hands plus Calyrex Ice into the same Miraidon Frigoraph lead that I had been doing. His Iron Hands is aligned with my Miraidon, and so I thought that the play that Justin was going to make would be something like Protect Calyrex, Volt Switch Iron Hands into Ditto, and get that pressure going. Justin went for just Glacial Lance with Calyrex as I ignored the slot, and I took way too much damage. So that I didn't end the game on the spot, but then I kind of panicked after taking all that damage, and 2 turns later, I tried to call a Trick Room reverse, and he did not reverse. He did not set up his own Trick Room. He clicked Glacial Lance again, as the good Calyrex Ice players do. They all just click Glacial Lance. So I ended up taking a pretty embarrassing loss in game 3 after the set was quite tight. The last game that I will talk about is the round 14 versus Carl. This was an interesting set of games. I lost game 1 to an end game where I had one turn of Tailwind left versus his 2 turns of Tailwind, and it was my Miraidon versus his Miraidon, and then I had Iron Hands that was at full HP, and he had Whimsicott. I have the faster Miraidon. I Draco Meteor his Miraidon, and I miss. It was my only Draco miss of the entire tournament, and it was quite consequential since he was able to Draco Meteor and then Moonblast my Iron Hands to take it out. And then he still had a turn of Trick Room. He had a turn of Tailwind left, and I could not Terrestrialize. I had already teared that game, so he's even with the -2. Miraidon easily goes down to the Draco Meteor. And, a game like that is expected to happen. I clicked Draco Meteor definitely more than 10 times over the course of the tournament, so a miss was bound to happen. We go into game 2, and I decide to adjust from a Tailwind-based game plan to a Trick Room-based game plan with Iron Hands and Friggraph lead. And it works out decently well. And I get to a point where the game is 4-2. Trick Room just ends, and I'm about to switch out my Iron Hands to sack my Friggraph and Ursaluna, which sets me up to fake out and Draco Meteor, where I can fake out his Chi-Yu that's locked in the ground Terra Blast, and I can Draco Meteor his Miraidon since I'm the faster Miraidon, and there was no speed control on either side. And I was Terra Grass Iron Hand, so Terra Ground Blast would not have swept me. The game DCs, so the judge comes over, rules it as a tied game. So we play game 3. There's a crucial turn where Carl switches in Whimsicott on my Iron Hands after it already clicked Fake Out, but I had a KO lined up onto the Whimsicott with my Chimpow, so he could only get one of Encore or Tailwind, and we both knew that not having Tailwind in the Miraidon Mirror match was going to be a death sentence. So I said that he wouldn't Encore my Iron Hands, and I was right, and that gave me a lot of momentum. And even though he got the Tailwind up, I had full HP Chimpow and full HP Iron Hands, which is just too much pressure for him to get past to take the win. So we go to Sudden Death, which I was not expecting to play. And thankfully for me, the Sudden Death was quite simple. I lead Miraidon and Iron Hands. He leads Miraidon and Friggraph. And I just say that there's no Whimsicott in the back. I'm going to Hail Mary this Draco Meteor and close combat into the Miraidon slot. If I miss, I miss. It's whatever. And even if there's a Whimsicott in the back and he switches into it, his other slot is a Friggraph, so there's not really any risk of being KO'd. And fortunately for me, the Miraidon does not switch. My Draco Meteor connects, and I take the set and Sudden Death, guaranteeing me into the money at that point. And then I won round 15 for an additional 1,000. Of course, it sucks to bubble, but I could not have imagined getting 9th place at the tournament and going into it, especially with the Talonflame and a team I picked up the Monday before. So I'm more than content with the placement.
Yeah, you had an absolutely crazy run, especially given that your losses were essentially to 2 players, right? And Eric Rios and Justin Burns at that. It's a really, really strong run, and honestly, it's kind of a shame, given the quality of players you face. But that's just the nature of these internets, where they are all so competitive. It's still really, really impressive, and it's a really, really strong team. It's a really cool take on Miraidon. Like I said, I think a lot of times in this format, it looks like these teams look very similar, but all these small changes make such a world of difference. And you had so many little differences from what people expected to face on Miraidon. Teched out for the mirror, like going timid, for example, the Combine Ursaluna, the Lifeform Talonflame, all these really, really cool techs that really made your team stand out. And it was really, really cool to see you do as well as you did. So yeah, congratulations on your run. Did you have any final words or shout-outs that you wanted to give?
Yeah, I have to thank and shout out Rajan once again. Um, without this idea, I genuinely might have been teamless, like leading up into the day for the tournament. This was not something like Talonflame was not anything that I ever could have just pulled entirely out of my own brain. It is thanks to Rajan's wild and creative team building that I saw the idea and I was able to recognize it and put in the elbow grease to sort of make it strong. But without his original vision, this would not have come together at all. The other person that I would like to shout out, because I forgot to shout him out in my stream interview at NAIC. I have to shout out my cousin Cody. He's my local TO. He's the person that got me into VGC many, many years ago. And I would not be where I am in this game without him. So Thank you, bro.
Oh, yeah. Well, on that note, I definitely recommend that you try this team out. Of course, the paste will be in the description and the rental code will be on screen. So I definitely recommend you try it. Yeah, until next time, I will see you all later.